Well, you can say that if you want to. It's up to you. Not here, so I'm doing double duty. She went home sick.
You all right?
Yeah, that flu thing is going around.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I think we'll get started. We have a quorum, although this is a committee of the whole. My other colleagues will be here. Commissioner Campos is on her way. I understand President White is also on his way, so we'll get started. I don't like holding up people's time, and I like to get it done and keep it moving. So I want to thank the chief for coming and for discussing this whole issue around, what we can do to resolve the issues downtown. Why don't you come and take a seat up front? Thank you, Chief. And so let me just sort of set the stage. I was, in the media with regard to the issues that are going on down at the bus terminal. We recognize that it's only a small cadre of youth that are causing this kind of negative behavior downtown. And I know that City Hall, the mayor, is working very diligent on a youth chief, and RTS is also working very diligently on it. And the board thought it would be an opportune time to find out what the issues are on the district side so that we can work collaboratively together. And we want to know exactly what has been recommended from the city side so that we can find out what needs to be done in order to ensure that we're going to mitigate the kinds of situations that occur down there. But as I said in the press, we also realize that there are, it's not only downtown.
Right.
It's in many places. It's at Charlotte Beach. I remember one year it occurred at the Lilac Festival, so it's a broader issue that we need to address. My role as representative on the 3-on-3 with City Council and with the county, this issue would also be presented at this body as well. And so let me just first, before I ask you to present, to welcome our community who may be listening to this conversation, and those who may be watching it by Channel 15, and those who may be watching it, streaming it through the internet. So welcome. And so we will start with Chief, you presenting to us what maybe some of the concerns and what we may be able to do in order to address those concerns.
Sure. And first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. I know we've had discussions in the past. The police department sincerely appreciates the relationship we have with the district officials, RTS, and we want to work cooperatively. We think fundamentally the best approach to this, instead of focusing each on our own narrow areas of technical or legal responsibility, that we continue coming together in a spirit of cooperation, being creative, and seeing how we can work together to mitigate the situation. So I'm very appreciative of the chance to be here. Before I get into specifics, I would like to introduce two of my colleagues who are here as subject matter experts. First, there's Lieutenant Mike Perkowski, and Lieutenant Perkowski is the supervisor of our downtown detail, and he's primarily the supervisor responsible for downtown, really from 10 a.m. through 6 p.m. So he is the primary supervisor we have that deals with the transit center. He is there every day, Monday through Friday, so I thought that his personal experience may be helpful. Also, I know you've met Sergeant Soto before. I have Sergeant Nelson Soto. He is the supervisor of our youth services section, which includes our school resource officers. So on a daily basis, he works with the various schools and the other district officials to try to make our SRO program work as well as possible. And again, he's here because of his subject matter expertise.
And let me just also, while you did that, let me just introduce on our side our subject matter experts. Let me introduce Michael Schmidt, who's Chief of Operations, and also Wayne Kittleberger, who's oversee our transportation group. So they will also have some information too, and we'll be asking them for any questions as well about this whole situation, issue.
All right, so you know, I know everybody's time is valuable, and I'll just try to give some very brief background. We know that these issues have really been coming up on a fairly regular basis for a number of years at various locations in the downtown area. So the transit center, we don't believe, has created this situation, and I know as commander of the West Division with responsibility for downtown going back to 2009, that we did have issues at various locations downtown. At that time was primarily the Liberty Pole area, some of the areas on Franklin Street, Mortimer Street, where these issues would occur. So what I'm trying to focus on today, after getting your request, was really try to focus specifically on the transit center and what we think might help mitigate the situation there. You did talk about a broader problem. I'd be happy to discuss that too, but I want to stay focused, at least initially, on what you asked us about. So the situation at the transit center is not necessarily new, but there's a couple different dynamics. For example, with the very, very cold weather we've had recently, typically that would, you know, inhibit some of this activity downtown because, you know, the students just didn't want to stand out in the cold for extended periods of time. Well, now there's a transit center, they can get out of the weather, so there's less of an incentive to go right, you know, to go right home. But beyond that, it is a point where numbers of students, and I'll defer to the district on how many are coming or have to come, but the point is there's large enough numbers that bring them together. And as you mentioned, we believe there's a relatively small number of students that are inclined to create disturbances and to engage in this behavior. The problem is, with everybody compacted there, it aggravates the situation. The other point is, which I don't think we want to lose sight of, is we're focused on these kids that are creating the problems. We're trying to deal with them, but there's a very large number of kids that are just trying to get to and from school, and that's all they want to do, is go to school and get there and get home safely. So we want to be mindful of that too. So after the transit center opened at the end of November, and by the way, we had a very good cooperative dialogue with RTS and the school district and really the time leading up. We had plans in place, and after the issues started occurring fairly quickly, you know, after the transit center began operation, I think it was December 23rd, we had a meeting that was called by Mayor Lovely Warren, and we brought various officials of the school district. President White participated by phone, and we had various officials from the bus company. And at that point, we had a pretty free-ranging discussion on what the situation is and what we could do to try to make it better. So we tried to achieve a consensus that Mayor Warren was willing to commit more police resources for a period of time to try to set the tone and try to get, you know, the students into the good habits that we wanted and to understand what the rules were. We did, after that, have a meeting. At the operational level, our staffs met, and it actually resulted in a 2-week detail where we actually expended thousands of dollars of overtime, you know, for police officers, additional police officers. I don't want to speak for the bus company, but I think they essentially doubled the number of security personnel during that period. And it wasn't just more people there. We also wanted to see, is there something we could do to make things better? Was there a better process or a better procedure? Well, one of the things we found during this detail that turned out to be very effective, with these extra personnel, we could post people at the entrances to the transit center and actually screen the students to see if they actually had the proper bus pass to come in. And again, I will defer to Lieutenant Perkowski because he was on the ground there physically every day of this detail. But it appears to us that tactic was successful in reducing the issues within the transit center. Now, as part of that, we made several suggestions that that we hope that the school district would follow up on. One of those was for this 2-week period, we had requested SSOs to work in a team setting with police officers and people from the bus company. We requested that all students be required to wear their bus passes visible on a lanyard. Now, the reason for that is it allows the officers, the security people to look and at a glance say, is this student supposed to be here? Do they have the proper bus passes? We would like the school district to work with the bus company to come up with a mutually acceptable way to deal with a code of conduct so that if we do identify specific students and can, definitively identify that they're engaging in fights or other improper behavior, that between banning them from the transit center or revoking their bus pass or doing something, I don't know what the best approach is, but I think it's possible. This is something where the police department may not have a direct role. We'd certainly be able to support that, but we certainly don't think arresting our way out of this is going to solve the problem. It just isn't going to work. So we would like the school district to sit down with the bus company. I know that the bus company has come up with a code of conduct, but we'd like to do this in a cooperative way that's going to be mutually acceptable to the school district and to the bus company. Another specific point that we saw during this 2-week period was we think there's an issue with these 2+2 passes. And I'm going to let Sergeant Soto explain that and actually kind of because I think you're the one that's personally knowledgeable of that. But I think what's happening is these 2+2 passes are essentially given out. In other words, I'm a student, I go up to a principal and say, I've lost my bus pass or I left it home. Well, they may or may not have done that. So while we were checking kids at the door, we actually found, I think Sergeant Soto may have confiscated in excess of 40 of these 2+2 passes, including individual students that had as many as 7 or more in their possession. Would you mind addressing that?
Good evening.
Good evening.
As the chief has mentioned, as part of the that 2-week detail that we conducted down at the transit center, I was part of that. What we did was we allocated officers in both entrances to the transit center, and I placed myself on the.
Could you pull the mic a little bit closer to you? Thank you.
I placed myself on the St. Paul side, and that's where I was monitoring the students coming in. And randomly, we were checking the IDs and taking the IDs and seeing what they had inside their linear. And some of them had anywhere up to 7 2+2 passes. And when we asked them why they would have so many passes, they would tell us that they were given by the athletic director or athletic personnel at the schools or another staff member at the school. That conversation was then brought, and I believe we had another meeting with some of the folks here who are present here tonight, and we discussed that, and I believe that they're handling that part of it. But the point is that if we would monitor that part of it, the issuance of those 2+2 passes, I believe will reduce the number of students coming down to the transit center. The orange pass, which we all know is the express pass, that pass shouldn't be that person holding that pass should not be in downtown, especially during between 2 and 4 o'clock, unless it has some other activities where the 2+2 pass comes in and they do have the ability to be able to get in there. I also wanted to mention that while we were doing that detail, if they had an orange pass but they had $1, we would allow them to come in. Obviously, they could pay the fare and certainly they could get in and move on. But going back to the passes, we were having students with the express pass coming in and also having the 2+2 during that time frame, which we didn't think that was called for because the 2+2 pass will be given to someone who had some type of a sports activity after school or other activities after school where he needed that 2+2. At 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, we didn't think that was proper to be issued a student that 2+2 if that wasn't necessary. So in other words, we thought, and this is us thinking, obviously we don't know the policies of the school and when they issue those passes, but to my point, we believe that if they reduce or have a better process of screening those 2+2 passes, I believe it will help us eliminate the large amount of students coming through the transit center. And I think that's to my point.
Thank you.
Okay, and on a positive note, it's my understanding, one of the things that's come up is, you know, there's numerous video cameras in the transit center, and sometimes there's large fights, and the students disperse, or the kids disperse, and we can't identify them. It's my understanding now that the school district is agreeing to work with us and the transit center to look at the video to see if we can actually identify who some of these kids are, and then the school can follow up through whatever the proper, you know, means are. So that's an example of a positive step in the right direction that we appreciate. So these are some of the things that, based on, you know, our 2-week experience and what we've been doing since November, that we think would help mitigate the situation. I want to emphasize that we are very open to any suggestions from the bus company or the school district. We meet regularly, and we're very willing to adapt what we do if somebody come up with a better idea for us. So I think that, you know, working together, we can certainly put the situation in a better place than where it is now. And so those are the specifics. We're happy to answer questions or go into any other areas that you're interested in.
All right. We also have Wayne Kittleberger, who's been working closely with RTS personnel. And if it's okay with Mike, if he can come up and talk about some of the resolutions to the issue that is being worked on now, unless my colleagues have any questions right now of the chief.
The only thing I want to say, and I said this to the president and vice president before, you know, I feel like it's Groundhog Day, because we had, and maybe you addressed this in your presentation in terms of solutions, and the chief mentioned that he was commander of the West Side before, so he knows this. When we had these issues at Liberty Pole, it was nuts, and we were able to really come up with a plan that worked. The school district worked. The mayor at the time came here and had a joint press conference with the superintendent, and I participated. The RTS folks participated. We did different passes to make sure that we mitigated the kids that were downtown, and then we didn't have that issue at Liberty Pole for a while, and that was back in September 2013. Now flash forward to end of 2014, part of 2015, we're talking about these same problems again, but we know how to make it work. We know to identify that we need to identify the kids that aren't doing that. That we may need to modify the bus routes for some of the kids that are being disruptive. That we need to have the SSOs work with the police department in concert. So a lot of these things we did before. We just need to dust them off and do them again. So I'm wondering where, and maybe you'll answer this in your presentation, what happened between September 2013, when we were able to solve this problem, when it was even more in the open at Liberty Pole. It was nuts down there. And then now at the transit center, it seems like we know what to do, and we just have to figure out how to reactivate that plan that we used last time.
So I think, ironically, I was going to begin with that, so I'm glad you introduced that piece of it. Last September of 2013, we had an extensive number of students that were in that Main Street downtown corridor. The dominant step that we took on around October 15th was to move a significant percentage of those students that were on a pass system that would have them travel through the downtown corridor and transition them to an express service pass, which that scheduling, not only the aligning of our district bell schedules, but also kind of working with the transit company in terms of the routing and so forth, mitigated the circumstances dramatically. So, and that model still is in place. 70% of the students that transition to and from school using RTS services are on express routes. The exact number is about 5,788 of the 8,234 students that are transitioned every day are using express services. And not to get too much into the detail, but the students that are not using express service are those in areas that, in terms of working with the transit company, there isn't enough students in a particular area to warrant an express route to and from that particular location, or the location that they're traveling to, whether it be a charter, a smaller public school or a parochial school wouldn't have enough student enrollment to drive that level of service. And then the third piece is there are a significant number of students, mostly our seniors, but also students in particular programs where they need access to a whole variety of other resources within the community. So those students also have passes that would allow them to transition to multiple points.
If I could just interject, but I would argue that it's not those students that maybe cause the problem, right?
I was going to say, but
Right.
I wanted to be able to frame at least
Sure,
the,
sure.
so, and we have those specifics, and we have it not only by a more general number, but also by school. But that's, in essence, from a framework. Now, that's not to say that the students that have been involved in a variety of these circumstances since the Transit Center opened at the end of November aren't either on an express pass or violating different pass restrictions. Certainly from our position, all of those instances, as we worked with the police department, are completely unacceptable. And, you know, we've worked with them, with not only with the transit center, but also transit company, excuse me, but also with the police department to do the best we can to, you know, hold the students accountable. The most recent step that we put in place, and then I'll kind of pause for questions, is to mirror, in a sense, what we do with our other contract providers. So whether it's a first student or a Monroe transportation situation, if an incident occurs on a bus that's transporting one of our students, we immediately are informed by the transit company. And our director of transportation, either Maria, Melody Dupree, or Wayne, will communicate directly with the school principal, directly with the parent, and the student will be held accountable through our own processes here within the school district. And we've begun to mirror that piece. I didn't say begun. We are mirroring that piece. The challenges that we face with the transit center has been twofold. One, because it occurs not only in the transit center, but sometimes outside the building, is being able to identify the students quickly enough. And because the transit company won't release the videos to us, in a sense, we have to go to the site and observe them. It's not feasible for administrators in 15 or 16 buildings to all come down to the transit center to view a particular altercation to try to see by chance if one of the students was in their particular program. So we did, as the incident, over the course of the last, week or 10 days, we've been able to kind of consolidate that system where Wayne is there on an as-needed basis. It certainly is weekly, but if an incident warrants it, he'd be there the next morning to view the tape, or view the series of tapes with Jim Ramos, the director of security there, and then with a series of screenshots be able to take that to the buildings. But that is a process because there still isn't a simple way to identify that student, whatever particular school they go in. They're not wearing, so to speak, their name, their school name on the picture, or they may not even be students at all, which we found in some of these more recent incidents that they aren't even enrolled in students, or they're charter school students or whatever it might be. So there's that piece. And then I think the last thought is what I've been very clear about is, and two things. One, we will, as I think everybody has said on the table, we will always work with our partners to try to help solve the problem. None of us want what we've seen over the last couple of weeks to continue. And I think from a district perspective, working with our partners. And I think the only other piece of that is that as we continue to have more diversified programming throughout the city, educational programming throughout the city, and the numbers become a little bit smaller at these particular smaller programs, it will necessitate a proactive solution because you won't be able to provide that express service for a small group of students to go to one particular site, whether it's an alternative program, whatever it might be. So we really are trying to be much more proactive, whether it's a charter, a public, parochial, or any one of our partners. And then the last piece of it is that the accountability for the student, if it's a charter student, that's a whole nother level of conversation with the leadership of that particular charter school. So that is a multifaceted problem. But to Commissioner Evans's point, the majority of the steps that took place, ironically, when I first started this responsibility back in September of 13, are continuing, and we believe that has really mitigated the circumstances to be a much more dramatic problem. If we hadn't had those steps in place, we would have had a much larger problem as we entered it. And the only other piece that I think was left out of the conversation is the month of December, the transit company made a strategic decision, in a sense, to provide almost free access to everybody within the system. So all of our passes became somewhat irrelevant in a sense because students could get on and off the system relatively easily and be a lot less easily monitored. Since January 1st, when that that pool of students become much less focused, our number of incidences have not gone away completely, but certainly have diminished. So we've had help from the transit company as well as for kind of consolidating, being more strategic with us, but also us being more open to working with them. And as Chief said, I think if there's other options out there that are more responsible in terms of proceeding to them, we certainly would be open to that. But I think we've really reached out and extended ourselves in terms of trying to make sure in the last 3 or 4 weeks here to try to mitigate those problems as much as we can.
Wayne, would you like to add something to Mike's conversation?
I think most of our problems in the downtown areas, as Malik was asking, why has it changed? It changed because I think that we have everybody under one roof now downtown, which is the new transit center. Before, in October, we was able to spread all the kids out from different schools. So maybe Shalaga went down to State and Main, and Franklin went down to Andrew Street. We didn't put the kids all together. Now that we have a new luxury place for them, they're all housed under one building, so that's why you're having so much havoc. What we did, we went down there, we are working closely with RTS. I have met with them in the last 2 weeks, Jim Ramos and myself. We have looked at pictures. We were able to identify the students that was down there misbehaving. It's not the student that really transport through downtown, it's the ones that are either not going to school, and we're able to identify them. Principals identify them. They tell us if they're in the program, if they're still enrolled in their school. And what we was able to do, they might have still had their bus passes, but each one that we identified, we deactivated the bus pass.
Good.
And we will continue to do that. We will continue to look at the pictures. We will continue to go down there and work along with RPD, RTS, and whatever we need to do. And also, we are working on putting a band together. People say a band, so how are our kids going to get to school if they get banned? What's going to happen if the kids come downtown and they start havoc in the transit center? They can be banned from the transit center. That does not mean that they won't get to school. They will have to utilize other services outside of the transit center, which will be at Main and Franklin, State Street. They just would not be able to come into the transit center to start any kind of problems, but they would still have access to get to school. If we see that they're not attending school, we will deactivate the pass, but most of the students that are going down there that are starting problems have orange passes, and they should be on express services. So as soon as we find out and we identify them, which we have been doing in the last 2 weeks, we've been deactivating passes. So we are working closely with RTS, RPD to try to rectify this problem, and we will be there to assist in any way that we can.
Chief, you have any response to what
Yeah,
they've said?
I essentially agree with everything that's been said, and I wanted to emphasize one point in terms of a strategy that one of the most important things we can do as a deterrent is to puncture the anonymity, and that is why it was important to us to have SSOs or people, because when these kids see an SRO there, knowing that SRO is going to be at the school tomorrow to deal with them, or they see other school personnel that they know recognize them, we believe, and we've seen this, we saw this at Liberty Pole. When we teamed up officers and SSOs together at that point, that proved very effective because that punctures that anonymity. So the video is great, and I'm glad. I knew there were some logistical issues with RTS and the videos, and then, like I said earlier, we're very encouraged that that seems to be working itself out. But in terms of a preventative tactic, you know, having those folks there is helpful. Now, what we did during the 2-week period is because our SROs, their hours are intended under a contract, they conform with the school hours so that they have the maximum amount of time on the campus where they're supposed to be. For this 2-week period, we invested the overtime to have them there. And again, we believe that was a good tactic to deal with this anonymity issue. And because when the kids know that they're recognized, it's just a much better situation. And that's why we understand that we can't do it all the time with the SROs. We understand your staffing probably wouldn't permit you to do it, every day for the whole school year. But if at particular junctures we could work together and do this over time on an intermittent basis, I think that may be helpful.
The other thing that comes up, former county legislator Calvin Lee, who was the legislator for the Southwest Side, indicated there used to be a lot of problems over on Genesee Street.
Right.
And one of the things that he said to me is that they had a number of men who would, volunteer and be out on the street, and that seemed to have mitigated.
outside of Madison.
Yeah, that seemed to have mitigated the situation. Now, I know that, and I haven't talked to the mayor about this yet, but I know she has this clergy on patrol.
I was going to say that might be a
Right.
wonderful
So
opportunity
that
to
may be an
utilize that
opportunity.
resource.
Yeah, right. So I will speak with the mayor about maybe having her clergy on patrol, or some other men who, and maybe women who would like to be down there and just provide the kind of, leadership and, because when they see adults down there, more often than not, they're not going to cause that kind of behavior. But I talked to a student about this whole situation. Let me just share with you what this student said to me. She said that you're not going to stop at all. She said because these students, these kids, they need release. In other words, they've got something going on with them emotionally. They need to get it off their chest. And so what happens is once they go through the beef, then it's over, right? They've got it out of their system. And so she also indicated that we probably need to have some more positive kinds of things for our young people to do. And she also said that they probably are seeing this behavior at home, that they're having these kinds of physical altercations at home. And so I just wanted to share that, put that on the table from a 16-year-old who just turned 16, who was telling me, about, what's going on, what she has experienced, either in school or, what they're going on, the problems that they're having.
That sounds like a very astute 16-year-old, and, I think she's absolutely right.
Yeah, right. I'm going to open up for questions. Melissa, Commissioner Campos?
I was just going to ask, so was the bus passes on a lanyard, is that a suggestion, or is that something that was, because you talk about puncturing the anonymity, so by being able to have a bus pass that's visual, not only does it help with the cameras, but also immediately you can tell whether that person's there or not.
We think that would be helpful. Again, none of these things are going to solve the whole
No.
problem. We're talking about a series
Totally.
of things for the reasons that you just said, that they're wearing it, and we know some students do wear them. We'd like to see it a requirement. And then again, it's the anonymity plus.
Right.
And it actually is easier because we don't have to have an officer or a security guard or anybody go up and ask a student if they belong there. They can
Exactly.
just, okay, that person's supposed to be here. We don't even have to deal with them. So in a way, it's less intrusive for them.
Is that something, hearing that, is that something that is doable for our?
When it was I suggested, maybe the term, but when it was brought to our attention, we were currently looking into it because the card has to be active when they tap it. We're trying to make sure that it's, in a sense, functional, because the student has to, in a sense, take it off, tap it, and put it back on. So we're kind of working through some of the logistics of that, but certainly removing the anonymity is, obviously, we would be in favor of that as well. So we're not opposed to that. It's just more of a strategic piece of it, and because it wasn't, so to speak, put in place at the beginning of the school year, there is a bit of a logistical piece of that. But they're currently, they are been directed by the district to make, when they're asked by somebody in the transit center, whether it be security personnel there or the school, that they're to present it when they're asked to do so.
Can I just follow up on that? So you're saying that there are students who may come downtown whose pass may be deactivated?
No, but the way the pass system works is that, in a sense, they tap the pass to have it activated so when they get on and get off. So students that are allowed to be down there would have to be able to use that pass. So we were just, when presented this as a possible solution, we're looking into the feasibility of being able to use it, but not because we're not, we want to make sure that, remove the anonymity, so having the pass displayed, we at least put in place initial steps that when asked at any time by any adult member of the community, whether it be law enforcement or security at the RTS center or our own security personnel, they are to present it on when asked. So that part was in our correspondence.
You're not necessarily completely in favor of it just being visible all
Oh,
the time?
no, we absolutely are in favor of being visible. We were just trying to make sure it logistically worked with the pieces that we were being
All right.
provided for.
So I'm just,
You done, Commissioner?
You're probably going to ask the same thing.
are you saying that when it's in a lanyard, it's not as easy to scan? Is that the point?
We wanted to be certain that it was
Okay.
easy to, that wasn't, like I said, when presented to us at the end of December.
It was like confusing.
Okay.
I apologize, man.
Okay.
No, so is that something that we're moving forward on? I'm just curious, just
Yes.
the status.
The answer to
is
that
on
question would be
it.
yes, absolutely.
what would be the time frame?
I can find out for certain. It's like I said, I can work with Maria and Wayne to find out for sure. I'm not exact, I hate to say the
Yeah,
wrong
no,
date,
I don't
but
want to hold you to something.
certainly sooner rather than later,
Yeah,
This is how we would like it to look.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
With the bags.
which is
Right.
our protocol for all of our staff members. Exactly.
Yep. That's it for right now.
So I think you said that the majority of the problems are from students who actually have the orange passes? Is that, or a significant number?
The ones that we identified, most of them had orange passes except one that should not have been downtown. So I guess some of them do have access to their dollar and get downtown. The RTS drivers know that they should not accept any orange passes going downtown because of the express service. But we can't say that's what's happening because anybody can pay $1 and get downtown.
Right, but it's the reason I'm asking is because we've heard some, or I've seen and heard some people advocating just completely eliminate any youth from the transit center, which I disagree with because, I mean, I think we have students who do need to go to legitimate programs, and I think that's just like a draconian over-response, but if the problem is largely from students who actually already are assigned to express passes, then that just even reinforces more that that's not the solution. You know, like taking more numbers of students who are allowed to go downtown and assigning them to express routes is would not necessarily solve the problem because we're already seeing, you know, a large number of express route students coming anyway. So it's these other solutions.
Sure. Well,
as
the
opposed
7
to that.
students, enrolled students in the school district, those 7 students had orange passes. There were many other students that were involved in different facets of it, but they were not students that had express passes. So once again, it's a pretty small number to make any, as I think we're agreeing, to make any broad statements in regards to that. And I would agree with you that because of the nature of our programming, instructional programming here in the district and the idea of making it more individualized as much as possible based upon the student, then having that limitation of the students not being able to transition through the transit center would really put our students at a significant instructional disadvantage. So I would agree with you in principle that we want to, where it's feasible to have the majority of students express services is we wouldn't want to have a broad, I would agree we wouldn't want to have a broad initiative because we would lose out on some really amazing opportunities for our kids.
Thanks. So I've heard from people who are concerned that, you know, the students who are actually avoiding the transit center because they're either fearful because they may have encountered someone that they have a problem with, a serious problem, threat, or they're just scared because of the chaotic, potentially violent situation, or, you know, other reasons they're trying to avoid it. And I understand some students have wish that they could actually exit a bus somewhere closer to their home rather than go to the transit center. Like in some cases, I realize this wouldn't be a panacea or anything like that, but for some students, if we could just, you know, with all these different small measures, somehow reduce the total numbers, reduce the numbers of problems, is there a way that students can be allowed to get off the RTS buses closer to their homes rather than being required to go to the transit center?
The students can get off wherever they would like to get off. It's that there's not a required stop for them per se. But I think maybe the broader answer to your question is that we would really welcome the conversation with the transportation provider to be able to have more flexibility. In a sense, we don't route the students. We provide them with the addresses and the identities of students and so forth and where they're going to, but RTS handles all of the routing of those students. So the flexibility within the system, if there was more flexibility in the system, we would welcome that.
So can a student get off at a bus stop?
Absolutely.
Except to ring
Why
that
have
bell.
we
Can I ask
heard-
for clarification on
Is there some
that?
discrepancy there? Because
Yeah.
I've heard that bus drivers will not allow them to exit.
It's public transportation. If buses go down main streets, if they push the buzzer,
Right, the buzzer.
at any location that they want to. These are young adults, they can.
Have you
But
heard?
if they have to transfer to get home, do they have to go to the transit center then?
They don't exactly have to go to the transit center, they can go to Main State, or they can go to Franklin Street. If they want to transfer, they get to either side of the city. They do not have to go right into the transit center. But most of them do because all the buses go into the transit center now. So it's new to our kids. You know, but they don't have to.
In fact, one of the challenges we faced is the students that would get off prior to getting off at school. So, and we've worked with the transit company
Right,
because
I
they would get off there. So that would be a good example where we try to mitigate that circumstance, whether it be a convenience store or a McDonald's, whatever it might be, because we have the possibility or the potential for a situation to occur there as well. We would like the students to get off at school in the morning and go right to school, but if they can get off and it's more convenient for them to get home without going through that, then there's no precursor. But most have to transfer to another
I guess,
bus.
I mean, I heard actual scenarios of where it was not more convenient, it was less convenient,
Sure.
but they were actually fearful and wanted to actively avoid, even if it meant walking further or whatnot, but they couldn't get off.
If those scenarios arise, I think the best advice for a student is to work. There is a number of different resources at the building level that we can connect with to provide them possibly a different route home in terms of using the transit system. So I think, like I said, there's probably some opportunities there that I may not be aware of, but I think there are resources at the building level that certainly can help a student with that.
Mr. President?
Yeah, although I did not litigate that case, I seem to recall reading in the paper when the whole controversy arose about RGRTA transporting kids, part of the resolution, and I think it was in federal court, was that they had to be regular transit routes, so making stops wherever they could. So there's no question that these kids can get off wherever they want because that was part of the deal. It had to be, because there was a dispute with the yellow bus company, all that stuff, right? So these are regular buses, and anybody can get on and get off whenever they want to. That was part of the deal. And so, but my question was, I just want to make clear for the record, Chief Simonelli, I sat in on that meeting, and I thought you were absolutely on point. The meeting I'm referring to is a meeting I participated by telephone. I thought your plan was a good plan, a solid plan. It included a short deployment of SSOs, our security officers, for a short period of time so we could have an assessment period. It also, of course, included the thing about the cards, the identification cards. I believe that was very reasonable. But as I indicated, it is not the job of the board. I indicated to your boss, the mayor, it is not the job of the Board of Education to engage in specific deployment directives. That's not what we do. Your relationship with your boss is totally different than our relationship with the superintendent. We don't do that. But I did want to state for the record, and I did say to your boss that, and to my colleagues that I thought this was a reasonable ask. And it is good to hear, Mr. Smith, you say that you are looking at the cards now, and it's just a matter of logistics. The only question that remains for me is the SSOs. Where are we with that? Will we be deploying them, as former President Evans said we did previously, we did Pathways to Peace, will we be deploying them in any capacity to assist in making sure students know that there are adults who can identify them when they're cutting up and not acting appropriately? Where are we at with that?
I'm not really in a position to speak in regards specifically to the SSOs, but I think from my office, the transportation office, not only Wayne but myself will be consistently in the transportation center to work with the RTS and the Rochester Police Department in regards to that. But I couldn't speak to the deployment of the SSOs.
Either Chief, thank you, Mr. Smith. Chief Simonelli, do you know where we're at with that, or perhaps Mr. Lopez could address it?
I may have to defer to Mr. Lopez. What I was informed by my staff that there was, that the district declined to do that. And I don't want to speak as to their reasons, but I want to reiterate that we would be happy to work with them. I know we deployed together. I actually helped work on the language the last time in 2013 when I was a deputy chief, so that, you know, the roles were strictly defined. We understand that there may be concerns, but if there's a way that the district can see its way clear to do this, we'd be happy to work with the district and the bus company to plan out when we do it, how we do it, and to do whatever document, whether we need an MOU or whether we need something to define roles. We understand that there's concerns with them going off school grounds, and, you know, and so bottom line is we'd be willing to work through the way to do this because we think it would be helpful.
Mr. Lopez, can you address that?
I can only say what the superintendent has told me to say, which is that he has major concerns about our SSOs being downtown and having to interact with students that are not our students because of the potential legal liability issues. And he says that he has explained this already in the press, that he's explained this to the board before, that he's explained this to the mayor, that he'll be talking to the mayor and to Bill Carpenter later this week when he meets with them on Wednesday, and that's all he wants us to talk about right now.
Well, if I could,
I
know, yeah, just to follow on, like I said in my earlier comments, this is not, we did this before, and Chief Simonelli remembers, and I think Mr. Schmidt also remembers. It's not, again, I think that we just need to revisit what we did last time. We did at one point have, not for an extended period of time, but we should even have this in the back of our heads as a plan B, so when it gets 80 degrees and people are out, we might say, okay, at this point, we may need to have school safety officers go down there, particularly if, and if the lanyards are there, they should not be approaching kids that aren't there. But I think that we had a solution before. I just think we just need to revisit it to see how we can dust that off again, because it's not like we've never, and our superintendent is aware of this because it was his idea last time. So this isn't something new to pair them up. We've done it. We did it in September of 2013 for a short period of time at the Liberty Pole. So it's not something that's new.
Just one other comment, just so the record is clear. No one, absolutely no one, including the chief, was calling for the deployment of SSOs throughout downtown.
Right.
That was not the plan. That was never the intention. So comments that suggested that there were cost control problems with doing that were not accurate, because no one was suggesting that these officers be deployed throughout our city or throughout downtown. And furthermore, I think the proposal was that this be an engagement for a very limited period of time. And my understanding is there wasn't that agreement to do that. I think we do need to have, this Board of Education does need to have additional conversations with the superintendent, because I think, I can't speak for the board at this particular point, but I think, let me just state, I think the chief's recommendation is eminently fair, reasonable, and may in fact protect our children.
If we were to, I mentioned earlier about the mayor's clergy on patrol. If we were able to get that group or other volunteers, would that help to mitigate the kinds of issues that may be going on in light of the superintendent's resistance to put SSOs down there? Would that help to solve the plan that we're trying to put in place? Would that be helpful, I guess is what I should ask.
Yes, we think it would, and that's actually why we started this program, to walk the streets with them, and I think the same benefits we would have, even best case scenario, personal knowledge, or, you know, the parents are part of the congregation,
Right.
That would be great, but
Okay.
I think that, I think there's certainly a manner of approach that a member of the clergy can take in dealing and diffusing these situations, and actually, I think the visual, the image of the clergy member with a uniformed police officer, I think says a lot, which I think also has a good impact.
President White?
Yeah, returning once again to the solution. Mr. Lopez, since you are counsel for the Board of Education, would you be so kind as to have your staff research what the liability considerations would be for SSOs going to an off-site location? It appears that you indicated that was a superintendent's concern. We need to be working towards a solution. And so if, in fact, the superintendent's concern is there might be liability concerns.
Well, he had two concerns. One was the liability concern, and I will be glad to have us research that issue. The second concern was the cost concern, given that we already pay double what it would cost us to just give the kids passes to bypass downtown. And so he thinks that it's not the responsibility anymore of the school district to be in charge and control of that it's RTS's, because we are paying them double the amount that we would normally pay if we just give the kids bus passes.
Okay, but
like we used to years ago.
I'm just focusing on identifying, Mr. Lopez, let me finish, identifying the solution. One of the issues that the superintendent has raised is that there might be liability concerns. So as counsel to the board, I need you to research what liability concerns might be attached to it, because if there are some liability concerns, this whole conversation is moot. President Evans correctly indicates that we did this for some period of time and nobody raised that as an issue, but that doesn't mean there aren't legal issues. So we would appreciate if you'd research that. And then I think if that is not a hurdle, then I think we turn to issues of cost. But I got to tell you, my recollection of the effort that the superintendent and President Evans spearheaded, and Adam McFadden and some others,
Loretta Scott
spearheaded, involved the use of the van, the red van, because we have, at least at the time, we had
the
SSOs,
roving
were
SSO.
roving SSO vans, and their job was to move around the city.
Yeah.
And my recollection was they were the persons that were associated with that last effort. Additionally, in terms of time and money, not only could we utilize these roving SSOs, but my thought was, I don't know, Chief, when exactly you did this deployment, but it would be around, what, 3, 4 o'clock? What was the time frame?
What we did it for a 2-week period, and the hours, the enhanced staffing was, well, since you were there, why don't you say it before I get it wrong?
We started our detail at 3 o'clock,
3
and
o'clock.
we ended at 6 o'clock.
Now, I don't know the logistics, I'll be honest, I don't know the time frame with which our SSOs work, but I would imagine there are probably some that work between the hours of 3 and 5. So the proposal, again, I was there participating by phone, the proposal was that there be a deployment of our SSOs during that time period where they're probably working not throughout downtown, but just around that area known as the transit center. So again, Mr. Lopez, if you could research whether there's any liability concerns, and then I think we can deal with the issue of the cost of deployment. Quite frankly, I think what we've known from past practice and what we can just discuss here, roving van and between 3 and 5 when most of our SSOs might still be working anyways, I don't see this as a major cost consideration.
Can I?
Commissioner Powell has a follow-up.
Thank you. I don't know how much of this was covered before I arrived, so I'm going to couch my question as part of the solution package that we're discussing. If the issue is liability of interacting with kids that are not ours, I presume we're talking about parochial schools and charter schools. If these kids are misbehaving, same with our own kids, we have the prerogative to revoke the transportation services.
We pay for it.
If liability is the issue, then maybe we need to think about different courses of action to react to the different student bodies. Likewise with our own, because we don't want to treat parochial or charter school kids any differently than our own. If it's our kids who are transiting through the center, don't have an express bus, there's nothing that says we can't involve the placement office and invite these kids to accept a placement at a school that will take them on an express bus, or a school that's within walking distance of their home. The fact that placement is not at this table, I think, is a shortcoming of the conversation, because one of the we don't have to provide transportation, but we don't want to reduce student attendance. So what alternatives do we have? Offer them other placements in other schools.
Thank you. Was there another follow-up, Commissioner Campos?
Oh, I remember. Chief, you said that with the SSOs, that it would be intermittently. You didn't say all the time. What would be ideal, as well as what would be bare minimum, would you think would be?
Okay, first, I'd just like to say, first, I want to clarify that we don't expect SSOs to physically interact with students downtown or off-site. Their role would be more of observers,
Right.
Their knowledge of the students, and then if there's some confusion over a bus pass or a bus pass rule, they have better knowledge than we do. So, and that's the whole idea of teaming them up with a police officer, that we certainly don't expect them to perform any role that would involve any physical interaction, with the students downtown. Now, to answer your question, that's something that we could talk about. I think we did it for 2 weeks straight.
Right.
one of the things that I think would be helpful if at random intermittent times we did it, whether it was once or twice a month, because then, you know, what we found was this, that, you know, for the immediate period right after the 2 weeks, which were the first 2 weeks back after the Christmas holiday, things, you know, were okay, and then as they realized we weren't doing it, and we actually follow this on social media, so we know what they're thinking, so, you know, we think if we instill the thought that, hey, any given
Never
day
know.
we could be there checking, that's going to be a deterrent.
Yep.
And the only other thing I would just ask, I believe there is some language about SSOs working with us downtown in the SRO MOU, so I don't know how that fits into the review, but I would just ask that, you know, that I believe there is language that addresses that. So, and I know that we're still working on
Right.
finalizing the current one,
Sure.
but I do think that shows that there is some history here, you know, of trying to work on this type of thing.
Commissioner Evans?
No, I've said enough, I'm sorry. The only thing I just want to say is, you know, I always use this word like low-hanging fruit and solvable. This is probably some of the most low-hanging fruit and solvable problems that we know how to do. And Chief Simonelli, when he was deputy, he was there, he knows. Mr. Soto knows. Our two individuals on there know. We know how to we know how to get these situations under control. And at the board level, all we can do is you know, raise them, but we don't do any of the day-to-day. It's not our job to do any of the day-to-day stuff. So and that's why we're having this meeting here today, because we want to send a clear message that we want to be supportive of an effort to make this happen, and we don't want to have to get involved in the minutia about the passes or anything like that. So I hope that we can figure it out, because we know how to do it. It's just not like we're inventing something new. We did something before, it worked, and we need to research, to President White's point, this issue with the SSO and not being able to come down. We've done it before. What we need to do, and then I think also from an innovative perspective, this goes beyond cost. I think some of this doesn't really cost anything. Communication doesn't cost anything, right? I don't think that costs anything, and I think that coming up with innovative solutions don't cost anything. And I appreciate hearing Mr. Kittleberger say, you know, if students are cutting up, we do have the right to revoke their bus pass. And number two, kids get mad at me, but I tell them all the time, I say, you lucky we provide you transportation, because technically we really don't have to provide anybody transportation. So to the students, I would say, look, you know, behave, because we don't have to provide you transportation. You could do it like my parents used to say. They used to walk 5 miles uphill and back. You know. So, but I really hope that we. Thank you, Chief, for coming. Thank you, folks from the district, for participating in this. I think that I really hope that we are able to solve this problem, because I'm not even worried about now. What concerns me most is when it starts getting warm, summer. So now, you know, it's so cold. Who the heck even wants to, you know? They're not. But as soon as that warm weather breaks, I really get concerned, because at the end of the day, my nightmare. Because I was and then I'll shut up. I was a student. I was a 10th grader when Stephanie Givens was killed. And you know what it involved? Bus. It involved transportation. It involved the bus. And at the end of the day, no one, and then we started doing metal detectors in school. I was a student. I remember it like it was yesterday. No one cared about whether or not it was the city, RPD. You know what people were saying on the news? Parents were saying, what the heck is the school board doing? What is the school? What are these people doing that are responsible for protecting my babies? They didn't care if it was a city issue or a district issue, if it was the superintendent and the mayor. All they knew is that their baby was lying in a body bag, and all the students were frightened because we didn't know what was going to happen next. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's RTS or whoever. If someone gets murdered, we're all going to be in a world of trouble, and that's what we have to really stay focused on, and then work out all this mechanical stuff, this turf stuff. You know, we really have to keep that in perspective, and I think when we do that, we'll solve the problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Evans. Mr. Felix, who's our parent representative to the Community and Governmental Relations Committee.
I've been very patient all night long, but I've heard one missing component that hasn't been addressed. And we had this conversation with the superintendent last night. Parents have not been invited to any of these meetings, any of these discussions and any of these solutions. And if anybody's gonna solve this, it's gonna be us. And as I spoke to your lieutenant over there, I will be making sure that Mr. Robinson, by way of you, that the parent council contacts him so he can give us a tour, the parent council a tour downtown without all of this going on. Because, and then we can come back in and we can start to identify some of these children. Because had you come and asked us, I'm quite sure that those who are available wouldn't mind walking through there, and we quite possibly can identify the troublemakers without you having to bring somebody over there to be paid. Because we have a vested interest in wanting to make sure that our children get to school and get back home safely, contrary to what some people may think.
So, Mr. Felix, Mr. Jacobs, are you saying that we can count on some of the parents from the Parent Advisory Council to participate and walk with some of the police and being down at the bus terminal?
You should have been at the meeting last night that we had with the superintendent, because it was very spirited. That's why I sent you that email saying that we need to start being included when it concerns the safety of our children and also the instruction. Because we keep coming in after the fact, and then you come and talk to us after there's been an incident, when quite possibly we could have stopped it before it got to be this bad.
Well, you know, honestly, I don't know what the protocol is, but I can tell you, in other areas of the city, we walk together with citizens that want to work with us, and I can extend you, we would be happy to do it with you. I don't know that we have to do anything other than sit down and work out a time, get some volunteers together, have a training session, and we can start it. We'd be willing to start that any time.
I'll be working on that right after the school break.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
With all due respect, Mr. Jacobs, I think and speaking as a current parent, I think we all are very, very well aware of what's been happening down there, and you know, some of us are involved ourselves whenever we can to be out there, you know, on the ground and facing people. So nothing's been stopping parents from being involved. I applaud and more organized, committed effort, but just take my cynicism as a challenge to actually make it happen. Because there may have been a really spirited discussion, but as far as actually getting people out there on a consistent basis, there are so many obstacles.
Well, we just heard a resolution just now.
Right, and
So,
that's great, and
yeah.
I hope it happens, but I just, you know.
I would say we have
it's
programs
there's
already.
certain things that we don't have to wait to be invited to do. You know, and there are mechanisms of being able to
Commissioner Adams, some of them have jobs, but I'm sure they can use some of their vacation time.
But I'm just saying,
and
like,
come
you don't
during
have to say
school
the
day.
district didn't invite you or the police didn't invite you.
Yeah, but
to
just
get
allow him
involved.
to say what he needs to say.
I know,
Yeah.
and I'm speaking from a place of a little bit of frustration with efforts throughout the community over years of a lot of, you know, talk about, oh, we didn't get involved here, but it's not that hard to get involved. That's it. That's all I'm trying to say.
So where are we in terms of next steps, and can we talk about next steps offline, and that we can, we seem to have a challenge, but there seems to be a way in which we can work around that. Parents want to be involved. There may be an opportunity for other volunteers to get involved, you know, if there's resistance on the district's part. So is there a possibility for another meeting, or how do we want to coordinate that? And I guess, Mike and Wayne, we can leave that to your leadership on this issue. And
Absolutely, yes. We have a monthly operational meeting that involves the key stakeholders, the school district, the police department, as well as RTS. It's first Tuesday of every month. So we just had one within the last week or so. We'll have another one. We address all the issues we discussed today, amongst many others. I think that actually was put in place, as Commissioner Evans articulated, back in October of 13. That was one of the first steps that we took, is much more of a collaborative approach to doing this. And I think it's worked. It was quite nice. So Lori Baldwin sits on that committee, myself, Wayne, Maria, and then members of the other organizations. So, and then the other piece of it is that there is a ongoing dialogue between my office at Transportation, RTS, and the police department whenever we have any information in regards to student behavior and accountability. and those steps now are in place, have been in place for about 3 weeks now. So the piece about what Commissioner Powell brought about possible school relocation, although that step has not yet been taken, that is certainly on the table and been discussed with parents of students that misbehave, and replicating the same procedures that we have, whether it be a Monroe transportation, a first student, or the RTS piece. We believe that's the best way to go going forward because it promotes consistency across the board. So those steps are currently in place, and we will continue to do those. And we provide the last action step would be the lanyard piece, and we should be able to have a key date, certainly putting that in place right after February vacation would be try to get to it as soon as we can. And we wouldn't wait to have all the students in place. We would try to do it as we have the lanyards available and get schools online.
And then another next step.
Excuse me, Commissioner Powell?
In terms of next steps, I'd like to reflect back on President White's comment about a legal brief on the liability issues. I think any such brief that does not address the concept of revoking transportation passes for misbehaving students would fall short of a full analysis of liability. Thank you.
All right, Ed, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you, Commissioner Powell. The other next step is that the superintendent is meeting with the mayor and Bill Carpenter the middle of next week.
All right,
And
thank
they're
you.
continuing these discussions.
Thank you, thank you. I think I'd like to have sort of just a 15-minute update, probably next month, until we really resolve this issue, that we've got a system in place that works for each entity, the RTS, City of Rochester, and the City School District. Is that possible that, maybe next month, 15 minutes, just let us know where we are on this situation?
To this committee here?
To this committee?
Sure.
Yes, yes, yes. Anything else that, Chief, you'd like to say, or Sergeant Soto?
I'll just say again, I appreciate the communication we're having. I'm hopeful that this is going to lead to an even stronger collaboration. In terms of the specifics, we will follow up on the clergy on patrol. We will communicate with them. We actually have a meeting coming up March 2nd with the group, and maybe even before that we can get a communication out to see what interest there would be there. And again, as to the suggestion of the parents, we have citizens walking in different parts of the city. I think it's usually neighborhood-based, but I think a variation on that is to, if there are school district parents that are willing to work with us specifically in the downtown or the transit center area, we have a program in place. It's very easily done to adapt that program to maybe help address this. So maybe there may not be one single solution. I know there isn't one single solution which is going to make this better, but maybe by pursuing as many of these avenues as we can make the situation better.
And let me just volunteer myself to be a part of that. So
Okay.
I'd love to walk with a police officer down there and
We will
Be
follow
a
up
part
and
of
we'll
that?
make sure that we communicate to you what our progress is.
all right, all right.
Could you introduce Mr. Robinson? Because he's like our
What does he need to be introduced
Office
for?
of Parent Coordinator.
Willie Robinson?
So he needs to be introduced why?
Because he's going to be the one that's going to be like the focal point. I don't have an office.
Oh, the parent, he's saying the
Oh,
parents.
okay,
He's saying
okay.
he can connect with Willie to get the parents involved.
Okay, all right. So Willie Robinson is the coordinator for the Office of Parent Engagement, Chief, and so it may be through him that the parents are coordinated. So thank you so very much. Any other last questions or anything? I think we're on the right track.
No, thank you,
I think
Commissioner
we're
Elliott,
gonna-
for pulling this
Thank you so
together.
much. I think we're going to do this. It's for our students and for our community, and I look forward to the work that each entity is going to do on this issue. Thank you so very much
Thank
for
you.
coming. Thank you.